regardless, this title race. I'm saying it again. I'm using the phrase, the word, and an interesting kind of wrinkle happened over the international break. Dayot Upamecano out long term. Alphonso
Mm.
Davies, which, like, at the time it was such an odd injury because, like, he got hurt, he gets out of the game against the United States and then spends the rest of the game on the sideline, like as kind of like as an assistant coach, just Jesse March, and he goes back home and no one really thinks much of the injury, and then he comes home and then they have to fix his ACL, and then today they realized that there was actually even more damage to this knee. What turned out to be like hopefully just a couple weeks, is now an 8-month injury. So this is a long term problem for Bayern Munich. This stretches deep into next season now. But he
Mm.
was a really important player for them this year, and he's out. Upamecano is out. Kim has been struggling with problems. Right, there was the big story heading into the international break where the Korean head coach complained that he wasn't available for them and because of Achilles problems. So he's struggling with injuries. Manuel Neuer's celebration injury had a huge setback of the international break, so he's out. Um, it's really like, it's the entire backline is essentially on crutches at the moment there.
What are they feeding these guys in Munich? They're getting injuries from
Some
celebrations, from standing on the
Weisswurst.
sideline. Honestly, God. Is it also worth, Manu, bringing in the conversation or the kind of drama around Upamecano, Davies' agent as well, and his
Oh,
statement in the Canadian FA and stuff like that, just
oh
for
my
people
God.
who don't really follow?
Yeah, so Nick Jose, his agent, released a fiery statement. I think he spoke to Münchner Merkur, right? And he said Alphonso Davies quite clearly wasn't fit enough to play. There was, I'm paraphrasing here. There was an arrangement made that he wouldn't be playing in this game.
Hmm. Or
And
that he might come on like for a couple of minutes at the end of the game.
yeah, I mean, the idea was that he wouldn't start. The Canadians, Canada Soccer, the name of the football association in this country, has pushed back on this and said that there was clear communication between the player and the coaching staff, and that they are professionals and know what they're doing. Something that Jose has claimed that they are not, right? It's a complicated relationship too, and I think maybe for context too, Jose, his agent, is also a bit of a father figure to Alfonso Davies. When he grew up in Edmonton, that was it was one of his teachers and turned agent now. So he he is quite protective of Alphonso Davies. At the same time, we don't know what the dynamics were in the dressing room leading up to this game against the United States, and we need to add too that in the current political climate, the United States against Canada isn't just a game, right? It means a lot, especially for Canadians, and we don't know what was said between Jesse Marsh, who, by the way, is an American head coach, right, but has been very outspoken against the statements made by the American president about the 51st state and all that. He's publicly spoken out against that, and so we don't know what was said in the dressing room and what sort of dynamics were at play here, right? We don't know. So Davies, according to Canada Soccer, said that he was fit to play. According to his agents, the wording was that he wasn't fit to play. So we have one statement against another without actually being able to be in the dressing room to have to. I wasn't there. I don't know what was said, right? And that complicates things, but look, ultimately brings us back down to the conversation that we had on the main show this week, right? Following the Germany-Italy game and the Nations League and the whole climate around the Nations League and the way it's set up. Why does CONCACAF Nations League need a third place final? Especially in a year where all the major CONCACAF nations, Canada, US, and Mexico, are qualified for the not the Club World Cup, for the World Cup in 2026 as hosts, anyways. Why do we need these games? Like, I understand that these nations need to play friendlies, but to put it in the light of a competitive fixture, and we all know how athletes tick. The moment you make something quote unquote competitive, they want to take part of it, and that makes rotation very hard. why you schedule this in the first place. And this isn't just about CONCACAF Nations League. This UEFA Nations League will also have a third place final in June. 4 or 5 days before the Club World Cup starts, and like 4 or 5 days after the Champions League final, it just seems reckless, right? That is my opinion on it. And I there's a huge rant on the Monday part. If you want to listen back to that, I reiterate that here, and it just seems reckless what's going on here. And I think that is at the very core of this very issue. And Bayern Munich, I think they're feeling the brunt of this now, because it's Davies, it's Upamecano. Sure, Neuer got hurt in a Champions League game, and he is old. He's 39. That can happen, but it's a lot of games for these guys.
Yeah, it's a lot of games. It's ridiculous. And as you said, we went full rant mode talking about international football on the bonus shows this week.
Can I just add one more thing? Because I also think it's not just international football. UEFA also added 2 more Champions League group stage matches and another 2 playoff games. So, that's for a club like Bayern Munich, that's 4 additional club games in an already insanely congested schedule. So I'm also want to say, like, okay, in fairness, because this was pointed out to me on social media, and I concede this, and I think this is true. It isn't just international football; it's also club football. There is too many games added everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, 2 games is different from an entire new competition being made in the terms of the Nations League. But yeah, you're right. It's everyone wants a bigger piece of the pie, and we're now in a situation where Bayern's predicted lineup from the Bundesliga website for this team is Urbig in goals, Leimer at right back, Eric Dyer and Ito at centre back, and then Guerrero at left back, because of course Kim's still out with his Achilles injury, Neuer, Davies, and obviously Upamecano as well. I think this is huge. I think this is huge for Bayern. Davies has obviously, we talked about this for much of the season, how he's looked back to his best. Coincidentally, when he was fighting for a new contract, we kind of poked and joked and laughed about it, but it's the truth. He's looked back to his best when he was kind of fighting for or making his case for a new contract, and he got that new contract. And it's a real travesty that he's picked up an injury that will rule him out for the rest of the season, because he was performing remarkably well leading up to it. And as we've said on the show this season, a really underrated kind of attacking factor in Kompany's team. He really was looking back to his best in the way he kind of bombed forward. So that attack will struggle without him, no doubt. And Upamecano was probably Bayern's best central defender, probably best defender, period, actually, this season. One of the big things we've been saying about Vincent Kompany's first season at Bayern is that he's found a way to get Upamecano to look like the prospect that he was at Leipzig once upon a time. He's been playing like Bambi on ice for about the last 3-4 years leading up to this.
But not good Bambi on ice, not Musiala Bambi on ice, bad Bambi on ice.
No. Yeah, even Musiala on ice would actually be quite a good show. No, he's looked like his old self in a sense. Him and Kim have formed a really formidable partnership. I remember Kim did a big interview saying, in fact, no, it was Upamecano, I think, did a big interview saying, they've both kind of built this kind of relationship or this partnership where they both kind of almost revel in the kind of criticism they used to get and how they're now making it work. And obviously, Kompany played a huge part in forging that and showing these guys what they were maybe doing wrong, helping them fix it. And, Upamecano has been a huge player for Bayern this season, and now he's out. So it's going to have a huge ramification on their season. Will they be able to get past St. Pauli? Yes, almost certainly. St. Pauli have looked better in recent seasons. They've caused upsets, recent weeks. They've caused upsets, but I'm not going to sit here and suggest that they're going to go to the Allianz Arena and pick up all 3 points, much like Bochum did, admittedly, a few match days ago, but I'd be very surprised. But looking forward, they've obviously got that double header with Inter Milan coming up not too long in the future. They've still got to play Mainz. They've still got to play Leipzig. Still got to play Gladbach as well. Still got to play Dortmund as well. And of course, most importantly, they've got the Bavarian derby against Augsburg after next weekend. So, they've got some tough games coming up, and they'll be missing 2 of probably their biggest performers this season. So, it's a huge blow. There's no doubt about it.
Everyone knows Bundesliga title hopes die on the road in Augsburg.
Because Augsburg are a serious club. who demand your respect, Manu.
I'm actually serious. Like, that's what happened for Dortmund for many years. Like, their title hopes always kind of like went on, like they died on the road in Augsburg. You know,
I think
can I
Mainz have
add?
taken that title recently.
Yeah, that's true. It's the Mainzes and Augsburgs and maybe St. Pauli's of this world that make the title race interesting. Can I add another aspect here that will make Bayern fans kind of really worried about this prospect of this title race being over or not? Kane and Kimmich are both only one yellow card away from a suspension.
In the Bundesliga.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So just add that to the pile.
Yeah, gosh, what happens if Kane gets suspended? They're going to have to wheel old man Thomas Muller out to play another 90 minutes and see how he does.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just a long list of players that are currently they're just not available. And it's like, as you know, at this time of the year, that list usually doesn't get shorter, it gets longer.
Yeah, but they do have one thing going in their favour, Manu, and that is that Leon Goretzka has a new fan club.
Does he? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you
Does-
tell
oh,
me. You're the one who told me this story.
I saw that on Blue Sky today. A very popular Bayern Munich account tweeted this that apparently, like there isn't much else going on at the Säbener Straße when the local journalist has to report the fact that during the closed training, a bunch of teenagers snuck in and shouted Leon Goretzka's name and had to be shooed off by security guard. And the tweet ends and they ran away without getting caught. This is the content I'm there for.
But
Stefan.
do you know what? This is actually quite interesting because the thing is, like Leon Goretzka, he's a very handsome man. He looks like a rock star. He's obviously got many fans who appreciate above and beyond his sporting capacity. But in recent years, they've obviously been shunned or shamed away from being open about that because he hasn't been playing well for Bayern. But because he is looking back to his best in the last kind of couple of weeks, he obviously had a good international break with Germany. The Leon Goretzka fan club, the forums have obviously started like churning back into action, and
Yep.
they're like, right, guys, we can come out from undercover again. We can wear our Leon Goretzka t-shirts with pride now, and get down to Sabina Strasse and support our man. And obviously Bayern and the Bayern staff are just having ups and downs of it. But it's interesting because I mean, on a serious note, guys like Goretzka will be relied upon heavily in the next couple of weeks because he can obviously fill in at centre back. He might have to fill in at centre back. But yeah, but he obviously can play a very defensive role as well. But yeah, they've still got that going. So yeah, Upamecano and Davies out, but it looks like Goretzka craze is back in fashion.
I mean, he's been phenomenal. He's been phenomenal for Germany as well as for Bayern Munich in both these games. I mean, we did an entire podcast on how Germany completely started falling apart the moment Goretzka was taking off for them, right? Need to add though too that he was only fit enough to play 60 minutes in that game. So even Leon Goretzka, bodybuilder Leon Goretzka, Arnold himself is showing some weaknesses at the moment. It's a grind. I mean, it does feel like, and as I think, this is an interesting conversation about all of this. Like, this is the time of the year now. We're heading into April. This is when titles are lost or won. In many aspects, I know the big finals are in May and sometimes into June, right? Like last year's Champions League final was June 1st, right? But this is the time of the year when those title dreams and hopes are being fulfilled or squashed. And right now, this is a grind. And it's really hard for Bayern Munich with all these injuries going on, international break, Inter Milan around the corner. Now you have to. Oh no! Here comes St. Pauli, right? This isn't exactly the glamorous fixture that Bayern players are getting up for in the morning, and yet it is a game that they have to win. Because if Leverkusen win against Bochum on Friday, all of a sudden it is 3 points, and you can't afford to slip up anymore, right? Because once it goes down to 3 points, I'm proclaiming this title race to be open, and then as Bayern Munich players, if it's only 3 points, then you're looking over your shoulder and it's like, no team's ever squandered a lead like that, especially Bayern Munich. Are we going to be the first Bayern Munich generation to actually throw away, 8 points? And let another team pass us in the title race? Unlikely, I think, but like, that will be in the back of the mind of these players is if they don't get the win here and if the gap shrinks to 3 points. I say if the gap shrinks to 3 points here, it's 100% back on. And that's difficult with everything else that's going on, and it is this grind that you will have players now really needing to dig in and getting the results that are necessary. And the game next week, you mentioned, it isn't going to be much different. And on top of that, St. Pauli is coming to Munich. And they will look at what Bochum did there, right? And say, look, we need to actually win these. We actually need to win this game as well. And Blessin is a really good coach. He's running a very disciplined ship. And he too will say, like, a point or 3 points here, if we get those, that will go a long way in the relegation battle.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It adds a kind of interesting kind of wrinkle to the Bundesliga title race or just the season in general, because usually at this point in the season, Bayern are already like 8 or 10 points clear,
Yeah.
And the Bundesliga is just wrapped up. They're just kind of flying through it in kind of auto mode and I was going to say drive free mode or whatever it is these days. Whatever Teslas do, and. They don't have anyone breathing down their neck. But the difference is these last couple of seasons is that Leverkusen have kept up with them, which is a real credit to Leverkusen, considering what everything they've gone through this season as well. They've had their own fair share of injuries. Because if you look at where Bayern are right now, they're sitting on 62 points after 26 games, I think it is. And that's actually their best points total at this point in the season since Jupp Heynckes was in charge in 2017, 2018. So it's not as if Bayern have suddenly started dropping points and let Leverkusen back in. It's the fact that Leverkusen have stuck with them and kept that pressure on. And that in itself is something that Bayern teams aren't used to in German football. They're used to already being having the title race done and dusted, and they can focus entirely on the Champions League. But instead, Vincent Kompany is having to sit and look at this St. Pauli game thinking, well, obviously there's not much you can do about it in terms of injuries, but obviously in years gone past, this would have been the perfect game to rest Upamecano or rest a Davies or rest a Harry Kane. But instead he's having to think, oh my God, I have to play. I don't have any option of who I play against St. Pauli. And then he's got a difficult game against Augsburg. He's got a difficult game against Dortmund, Mainz, Leipzig coming up as well. So there's no games there where he can rest players and challenge for the Champions League at the exact same time. And that's the kind of interesting kind of aspect of this title race or this Bundesliga season, which previous Bayern head coaches just didn't really have to deal with. And that's not, I must make it perfectly clear, that's not on Kompany. That's on the fact that they finally got a club in Bayer Leverkusen who have the mental capacity to keep up with them. Well, we think so. We'll have to wait and see what they do this Friday against Bochum.
That Stuttgart game was huge, right? I mean, just being there, and I had to rewrite that entire article that I had from that match, and just the way that they were able to get back into that game showed you quite a lot of where they are at, and this attitude of we don't want to give up. And Alonso said, the only title that Leverkusen, after this Champions League disaster against Bayern Munich, for them, they can win the Pokal and that'd be nice. But like, if they now go and win a double, a Pokal and a German title, no one will care about what happened in the Champions League, right? Because everyone will focus on Bayern Munich's collapse in the Bundesliga. And I think that's kind of fueling them a little bit, coming back against Stuttgart. I had in my article, I basically said, this is it, Leverkusen are done for the season. We now have to talk about like the rebuild and all that sort of stuff. And now all of a sudden it's like, no, actually, no, it's only 6 points. They can make this really interesting. I'm saying it's not saying that's what the case is now, but I say they could. And we have to also remember Bayern Munich haven't won the last 2 games. And what's your favorite famous thing that you said a few weeks ago? Bayern Munich only three non-wins away from absolute chaos.
I said society's only 3 hot meals away from the disaster, and Bayern Munich are only 3 winless games away from FC Hollywood.
We're only 90 minutes away from that. So potentially bring out the popcorn.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not holding my breath. I don't think they'll lose in this game, but you're right.
Yeah.
Stranger things have happened this season, so I guess we'll need to wait and see.
I mean, Union, and I did not have on my bingo card that Bayern Munich would drop points against Bochum and Union Berlin, and here we are. You know, like 5 points dropped against those two teams to let Leverkusen back into this title race. They dropped points against St. Pauli, and I think we are in a full on, really interesting stretch down to the rest of the season. So big match day, both at the top and the bottom of the Bundesliga table.